if you look at System Center 2012, I think for the first time you can see that these have been designed with integrating them in mind. If you start looking at the older versions, you know, SMS and MOM and, you know, Service Manager, yeah, you can integrate them, but it seemed to be they were designed as self-contained components and you put linkage in between them, and, you know, that could be a bit troublesome. And the first thing that struck me, I don't know how much time you've looked at the System Center 2012 stack, is that there's now a unified installer, which you can just double-click and installs all these products all in one go. It'd be quite a feat to design that one, I can tell you. Anyway, but let's go through Config Manager. I'm not going to talk about the consumerization of IT too much. We know what that's about, and I think everyone's had a little slide deck talking about the consumerization. So what does that mean? It means that people want to use their own devices, okay, whether it be iPhones, Androids, whatever the tablet. So what I'm going to do is just step through and go through some of the main products in the System Center stack, looking at Config Manager, Ops Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, and a new product called Orchestrator. There are a few other products in there. I think we've got some time to talk about Service Manager as well, because I think I've chatted to a few people this morning, and that seems to be quite an interest or topic of interest for people. Come on, click. Clicky things. So that's just my slide talking about the consumerization of IT, and I said I think we know that point. So let's just get straight onto our first System Center product, which is System Center Configuration Manager 2012. So really, all of these System Center products will help us achieve what James just demonstrated. For example, we've got application virtualization, which just demonstrated. What actually deployed that out into that Citrix session? It could be a number of things, but Configuration Manager 2012 is currently what we're trialing. So when you look at System Center 2012, what does it actually do? System Center Configuration Manager. Normally we describe this as a client tool. Okay, again, Microsoft would say, no, this is for clients and servers. Yeah, absolutely agree with that one. But certainly from our customers' point of view, they see Config Manager as a solution for maintaining the Windows 7 client machines, keeping them up to date, keeping them patched, giving us nice reporting on them, and giving us an application deployment mechanism. Now, when you look at System Center Configuration Manager 2007, well, I think the clue's in the name. It's still in there. It's System Center, and it's still very, very focused around deploying applications to systems. So, I mean, I've dealt with so many Windows 7 deployments using System Center now, and, you know, when we used to deploy operating systems, people used to say, okay, in that department, I want these applications. And now what they're saying is this user wants that application, which for, you know, the traditional versions of Config Manager, a little bit troublesome, because wherever you log in, it's going to install that application and leave this nasty footprint on all of your, you know, on all of your standardized desktops. Now, we can use things like application virtualization, which James demonstrates as well, and that helps us to protect that. But the biggest shift we can see in Configuration Manager is it's now focused and it's become user-centric. So if I want to deploy, let's say, for example, Adobe Acrobat Reader, in Config Manager 2007, in the older versions, we would package that up maybe in an MSI file, and we would push that out into all of the systems. In Config Manager 2012, what we do is we define the various types of connections the user can make to the server. Can they connect via a WISE session? Can they connect over a slow-speed connection? Are they using one of their Windows 7 phones? And when we define an application, for example, Adobe, we have to define how we're going to deploy that depending on the user experience. So it might just be if the user's working from home using a UAG portal, what it can do is if we're deploying to user Nicky, it says, okay, you're coming over a UAG portal, so that way I'm going to deploy it as a remote app. So when you're clicking on it, it's actually running on a back-end terminal server. So that's looking at Configuration Manager 2012. I'm not going to concentrate too much on the deployment of these because we're more interested in the features. But I've just got to mention a few things. The deployment of the Config Manager tool, of all the System Center tools has definitely been vastly improved. The key improvement is it's now very easy to give us high availability and also a bit of DR, whereas these things before were quite hard to make them highly available without virtualizing the whole estate. So that's looking at a Config Manager. The other thing we're finding is people using their own devices, whether it be a smartphone, when they're using a smartphone in the office, what we want to do is we want to have a little bit of ownership of that smartphone. Maybe I'm not happy that I've got people using the Apple or iDevices, as people call them, in there and syncing up and getting all the exchange on there. I want to have a little bit of protection on there. So with System Center Configuration Manager 2012, we can manage mobile phones. As it is at the moment, we get light management of all the active sync devices. Now, those of you guys looking at Exchange 2010, it's nothing more than that, really. Do you know? So it's taking ownership of the Exchange 2010 active sync settings. But it's putting it in a place which makes a bit more sense, you know, in your management tool. If you're using a Windows Phone, so Windows Phone 7, and you do get deep management from that. So we can run inventory, and we can also deploy applications to it. There is another product coming out that's starting to look at managing this sort of iDevices. But there's a few other third-party solutions for that, and Apple themselves have a solution. You can have a corporate server inside. So, yeah, if you want to manage iDevices, come and have a chat to us. The personal application experience, I pretty much talked about that, and I've got limited time, so I'm just going to scoot over that. What we're really saying is we're now working for the user rather than working for their computer. Rather than saying we're putting PowerPoint on there, we're deploying PowerPoint to a particular user. And it goes on from there. What we're also doing is giving the user the ability to select applications for themselves. So if we implement Config Manager 2012 and we deploy, or let's say we import Office 2010 into their Adobe Acrobat Reader, we can put a self-service portal up there. Again, all inbuilt into Config Manager 2012. You used to have to use third-party products for this. And now a user can just go up to a web page and they can select, oh yeah, I have Adobe, click on that box, and then they will get it. Sufficiently quicker than they did under 2007, let me tell you. So, yeah, we've got self-service portals. So that's Config Manager pretty much in the box. It's much more user-centric. Now, the VDI environments, yeah, it can manage VDI environments. You know, at the end of the day, Config Manager really doesn't care if it's squirting an application into a Citrix session via AppV or if it's doing a FAT install on a machine. It's just an agent, you know. So, yeah, we can manage our VDI resources deploying applications into those VDI sessions. Right. Application virtualization. Is anyone making use of this at the moment? Okay, so application virtualization, we're saying this is the next big thing. We use application virtualization. It solves a few main things for us. It's user-centric, so we can now deploy applications to the user. The great thing about this is, let's say in this room you're all Windows 7 machines. Now, if I'm going to deploy Adobe via setup.exe or run the MSI, then I've already affected the registry on your machine and your machine becomes unclean. Now, with application virtualization, and if I'm deploying it to you, we're running that application in a little bubble. We're not even writing to the localized registry, and we're preserving, well, I was going to say the health of that machine. Perhaps that's not the right word, but we're keeping that machine nice and tidy and nice and standard. And that's great for conflict detection. You know, in the old days when we were rolling out applications to, let's say, Windows XP, we used to make sure that the application wasn't going to conflict with anything else on that machine. And in AppV, it sorts that out. So I think the benefits, after using AppV for a few times, is it's user-centric. It's significantly easier to make it into, I'll call it a package for the time being, a package that we can deploy. Rather than repackaging, what we do is we do something called resequencing applications. Just when we quote for repackaging applications, you know, a good finger in the air is it takes 1 day to package an application. If you're going down the application virtualization route, you're doing about 4 applications in a day because conflict analysis is not part of it. The other nice thing about application virtualization is it's great for pool VDI machines. So if you're going down the VDI route where you're dynamically creating virtual machines that use a logon, then application virtualization can, you know, squirt the applications into that pool-based VDI machine at startup. Okay, so that's looking at application. It looks after Citrix. As I say, at the end of the day, it doesn't really mind if it's Citrix or it's a Microsoft stack. What are the other areas we're looking at? So is something called desired configuration management. We started seeing a little bit of this under 2007, and really what it was about is we can set up a configuration baseline. This configuration baseline could be for your servers, it could be for your workstations as well. So it might be saying, on all my workstations I need to have, all my laptop machines I need to be running drive encryption, safe boot, or BitLocker. I should say really, shouldn't I? So we can create a configuration baseline that determines whether you're running BitLocker or not for the laptop machines. And in 2007, if you drifted from that configuration setting, great, you'll show up in a report. In Config Manager 2012, if you drift outside of that configuration, we can now remediate against it. So again, this is all one product. So this is all Config Manager 2012, all in one product. Whereas before, you used to have to combine these products together. Now, when you start adding all the system-centered products up, this is when you start giving them power. So Operation Manager 2012, I just wanted to scoot through OpsMan 2012. Does anyone run Ops Manager 2007 at the moment? Does anyone run it for monitoring network devices? No. Okay, so we've got some for apps, some for network devices. I'm not surprised as well. I think for Config Manager 2007, it's a great solution for managing Microsoft-based applications. There's no better. I mean, Microsoft are creating the management packs. But was 2007 good for looking after network devices? Well, again, if you look to the website, yeah, it can do all of that one. But in practice, there were better solutions for it. Now, moving into the modern age, what we want is we want a unified solution. So it was fairly typical for me to see people running Config Manager 2007 for looking after their Microsoft apps and maybe HP OpenView for looking after a bit of the hardware side and a bit of the network side. And now we want to consolidate it all into one. One of the biggest changes of System Center Operation Manager 2012 is the improved ability to monitor our network devices. So again, what we're looking at is a single monitoring device that can not only monitor your applications, but can monitor all your network devices as well. So I'm just going to scoot straight on from this one, and what we're really saying from this is when you look at Config Manager 2007, you've got all these slides in the deck, guys. When you look at 2007, R2, and 2012, what we're looking at is just increasing the amount of environments we can support. So we can now support Java-based apps, net-based apps, and I think the big one, certainly from the customers I'm dealing with at the moment, is network devices. So we can move into a system center environment that can monitor absolutely everything for you. Okay, so that's a little bit about Ops Manager. The honest truth is nothing too much has changed in Ops Manager other than that. The console has changed a lot. It's easy to administer, and we've now got a web-based console, which it looks just like the standard MMC-based console. So I'm not going to concentrate too much on Ops Manager. Just want to move on to perhaps a bigger one, which is Virtual Machine Manager. So Hyper-V, guys, who's running Hyper-V? Okay, and you're running Virtual Machine Manager as well? No, okay. So I think with Virtual Machine Manager, let's move on to Virtual Machine Manager 2012. We do a lot of Hyper-V work, and our customers are really, really happy with it. But I've got to admit, when I'm setting it up, and I'm explaining it and passing it over to a customer, it can get a little bit confusing. You set up the Hyper-V console, and you're creating the network in the Hyper-V Manager. You then set up the cluster. We're using the cluster administrator for that. You then install Virtual Machine Manager. Great, that can see your virtual machines, it can manage it. But if you have something like your cluster goes into redirected access, Virtual Machine Manager doesn't know about that. So from our customer's point of view, what it means is I've got to tell them how to use the cluster administration tool and the Virtual Machine Manager tool. And it's not immediately obvious where you configure where you configure, for example, the network or VLANs. Where's all that about? Now, Virtual Machine Manager 2012, it's much more of a solution, and I don't want to compare with VMware too much, but it aligns pretty much to Virtual Center in that we now get a console which knows about everything to do with virtualization. In that console, I can now create a cluster. In that console, I can now create my networks. I can do my VLAN tagging. I can set up all my storage in there. Whereas before, it just didn't give, well, it wasn't a very tidy solution, I didn't feel. Also, when you're reading the VMware to Microsoft comparisons, VMware Type V comparisons, one thing that strikes me is none of them were fair comparisons, because when you're comparing VMware against Hyper-V, what we really were doing there to give it a fair chance, you compare VMware against Hyper-V plus Ops Manager plus Virtual Machine Manager, maybe Config Manager as well. But one thing that Virtual Machine Manager 2012 has brought into us now is the reduction in the amount of agents we need to push to give us some features such as DRS, Dynamic Resource Scheduling. So with DRS, if we've got, let's say, 3 servers, running up the front, and I've got 10 servers running on each, what it might do in DRS is look at a VM and say, oh, that VM's getting really busy, and that host machine over there, it's not doing a great deal. So, with VMware, it uses DRS, Dynamic Resource Scheduling, to move that VM onto another host machine, maybe because that's got more resources. And maybe it will look at shutting that machine down. Now, in the Microsoft world, we could do that with the 2007 products, but what we would have to do is put an Opsman agent on all the VMs and all the hosts. And we've got to put VMM on there as well. So to get to match up with the VMware solution, we had to implement Opsman and VMM. Virtual Machine Manager 2012 now has the DRS feature built in. Okay, so we do not need to deploy Ops Manager agents to our VMs. It can look at just virtual machines, and it can move based upon the utilization of those VMs. So that's one thing, usually that's changed to 2012, is the whole DRS piece is now in there. The other things that have changed to 2012 is really just terminology. And what they're doing is they're defining, these things pretty map to reality. They're defining a virtualization fabric, And when you look at the console, you'll notice what you define is you define your physical servers, you define the network, and you define the storage. Okay, as I said before, these were done in slightly different tools. Once you've defined all of those, you can form a cloud. And a cloud is just sort of theoretical layer that says, okay, this cloud consists of these physical servers, it bridges to these VLANs, and it can use these storage, which are highly available, and it's replicated across. And the nice thing you can do is you can create multiple clouds. You might have a test cloud, you might have a production cloud, you might have a training cloud, and you can delegate those clouds to different people in your environment. The other thing about VMM is Virtual Machine Manager will be able to look at potentially your VMs as well as VMs hosted somewhere else, potentially maybe on our cloud or on another cloud that you're using. So again, giving us a unified page. So that's looking at a Virtual Machine Manager. Again, I'll leave you to read through the slides. It's just recapping on the things I've talked about, and it's really just terminology based. But really the key message is we've now got DRS in there, and we've now got a unified console. We don't need to use Cluster Manager anymore, and we don't need to use the Hyper-V Manager anymore. So when we step back, what I've talked about is Configuration Manager. Config Manager knows about all your client machines. It knows about all your inventory. We've got a vast amount of information, so we're starting to know about your environment. We've got Ops Manager. What Ops Manager is doing, it's looking at your servers, looking at the health of those servers, and it's telling us when there's an issue with those servers. Now, some organization will leave it like that, and they take it to that far. If you want to go a step further, and I've got a little bit of time, so I'll introduce Service Manager. What you can do is you can have System Center Service Manager running, and this is like a help desk tool, so if your user's got a problem, what they can do is they can fire up a little web page and say, my machine's running slowly, I need more memory. What that would do is that would register an incident in the Service Manager console, and the operators can deal with that incident. Now, Service Manager is fully based on ITIL, so you've got an ITIL-based help desk system, and it just means that I can go in and I can pick on these machines. And it's clever enough to know that the user created the incident from a particular machine. Well, Config Manager knows about the machine, so Config Manager knows how much memory is on that machine. It also knows about the inventory of that machine. So when I look at that incident report from the user, I can say, hang on a second, that user's got 8 gig already, and troubleshoot it there. Again, if you wanted to, let's say we look at it and it says 2 gigabytes and we wanted to give them 4 gigabytes, I can right-click and say change request. And we can issue a change request from within that console as well. Now, where it starts getting really amazing is when you start tying Ops Manager up with Service Manager. This is when you get Operation Manager actually raising incidents on your behalf. So Ops Manager is managing all your servers, monitoring all your servers, and let's say one server is running out of disk space. What it could do is it raises an incident in Service Manager, just so that the second line, when they look at Service Manager, they can see, oh, that server raised an incident. And then this is where the witchcraft comes in when you use the next product. You might be able to right-click on that and say, resolve it. And that comes to System Center Orchestrator. So what System Center Orchestrator is doing is it's taking action of all these alerts, these incidents coming in, and based on workflows which you define, it can look at remediating them. Now, the Orchestrator tool, it's what's called a parlous, if anyone is familiar with a parlous. But when you start looking at this tool, it does seem like it is black magic, and lots of people are saying, well, it's amazing what this thing can do. It can start remediating. The key thing I want to say about Parlous is it's not designed for developers. It's designed for system people. So it's all done with workflows and sort of drag and drop workflows. You do not need to know heavy amount of scripting to get Orchestrator up and running. So the full solution of Service Manager, System Center would be Config Manager's feeding Service Manager. We've got a nice CMDB. We know about all the apps running in there. Ops Manager is feeding Service Manager with alerts. Okay, so Service Manager knows about all your incidents coming in, and based on those, it's doing change controls. I can right-click and say, okay, yeah, that disk is running out of space, or let's say let's do a slightly easy workflow. Let's say the defragmentation level on that is above 10%. So what we do is raise an incident. What will happen is Orchestrator will then raise a change control, and if you right-click approve the change control, what Orchestrator will do is run a defrag for you. There's loads of Service Manager sort of bubbled up from the surface, and I found lots of people. I was installing it for customers, and the reason I was installing it for customers is because they bought it as part of their license agreement. I mean, have a chat to one of our sales guys about the licensing on System Center, but it seems to me if you buy like 3 products, you've got them all. So Service Manager sort of came in under the scenes in there. I think when people put Service Manager in, a little bit disappointed to start with, And now Service Pack 1 came out, and 2012 has been vastly improved again. It's Microsoft's first sort of venture into that kind of area, the whole service desk tool area. But it's a really, really nice solution in there. And again, it doesn't require a heavy amount of development. It's designed for, system people.